more than 1,000 years old, and still standing guard on the banks of London's great River Thames. The Tower of London, England's most formidable royal fortress. It holds centuries of secrets locked within its 15-foot thick solid stone walls. For these ancient fortifications, set in grounds the same size as those of the White House, are far more than just a castle keeping London safe from her enemies. Over the centuries, the Tower has been, in turn, the private palace home of kings and queens, a secure strong room for the monarch's most precious possessions, the crown jewels of England, a near inescapable prison, incarcerating all who angered the sovereign ruler of the day, a fearful place of execution, infamous for bloody beheadings and the cruel torture of its victims. And in recent centuries, it has become a popular tourist attraction, fascinating millions of visitors each year. Every era of its history adds to the store of secrets hidden from public view. Still to this day, Her Majesty the Queen of England's personal guards perform historic ceremonies that the tourists never see. With unique access to the life of this extraordinary castle, we go behind the scenes to uncover the secrets of the Tower of London. The story of the Tower all begins in the 11th century. In 1066, England suffers the only foreign invasion ever to overcome her island defences. The new ruler, William the Conqueror, constructs a fortress in the heart of the capital city, designed to shock and awe any rebellious Londoners and deter foreign invasion. His colossal status symbol towers 90 foot high above the deepest inland port on the river, commanding the key crossing place at this hub of vital trading routes. By 1100, the White Tower is complete, a vast monolith to tower over London for centuries. Bridget Clifford, the Tower's historian, knows the secrets of the White Tower's birth.
William built the tower here to make a statement. He was a conqueror. It's sitting on the edge of the City of London, so it's standing over the native population. Behind us today, you can see how everything's grown up, but that would have been flat marshlands, so you could be seen from a distance from the south of the river. Even though now the White Tower is dwarfed, rather. When everybody else is living in 1 or 2 storey houses, this was an enormous, great stone building which represented power.
In the 13th century, the White Tower receives reinforcements. 2 new sets of walls spring up, fortified with 21 additional towers, costing millions of dollars. The moat is extended and flooded with water from the River Thames, creating a formidable stronghold. A seemingly impregnable defensive layout surviving to this day. The site spans 18 acres. And before you've even got through the gates, there are surprises hidden in the most unusual places. In the 1930s, archaeologists excavating the 100-foot wide moat come across bones from an extraordinary ancient menagerie. Buried here are the remains of a leopard, 19 dogs, and these ferocious-looking lion skulls. Sally Dixon Smith discovers that these were far from ordinary lions.
They're a type of lion that is extinct in the wild, called a Barbary lion. And in fact, the lions you see today in Trafalgar Square are also Barbary lions. They've been able to carbon date them, and we know these are the medieval lions. These were the ones that were here in the 12th, 13th and 14th centuries.
It's now known that the lions were part of a royal menagerie, an assortment of animals that the kings and queens of England never really wanted, gifts from well-intentioned foreign monarchs. In the menagerie's heyday, the tower houses 60 species, at least 280 animals. The start of what is to be 6 centuries of attracting the tourists. The first creatures arrive in 1235, the lions. Just 20 years later, an even greater sensation, an African elephant as a trophy from the Crusades. Well-meaning keepers make him drink a gallon of red wine a day to keep out the cold. He has a happy, drunken, but very short life. The Norwegian white bear is muzzled and chained up, although he's walked on a stout cord to fish for his lunch in the Thames. By the 18th century, admission cost 3 halfpence, but there is a discount scheme. Bringing a cat or dog to feed to the hungry lions earns you a free peek at the spectacle of the king's exotic animal inmates.
They were kept right here at the western entrance on the city side of the castle. This has always been the main entrance to the Tower of London. And as you can see, people are flooding into the tower to visit, as they have done for centuries. To get in, you had to go past all the lions, the bears, the tigers. They even had kangaroos. All sorts of animals from all around the world were kept here really as royal status symbols and as curiosities to visit. There was really nothing very scientific at all about the way these animals were kept. They were purely for spectacle and bragging rights.
Not all goes well. Animals escape, attack each other, and even visitors. Finally, the unruly beasts get their marching orders in 1832. Fixtures and fittings sold at auction. Today, visitors don't see a zoo, but they do pass under the historic 13th century Bywood Tower. None of them knowing that it houses one of the fortress's rarest secret treasures. A work of art so fragile that few people ever see this room. It lies hidden for more than 500 years, until renovation work uncovers something extraordinary. Removing layers of modern paint from around a Tudor fireplace, builders reveal the Tower of London's sole surviving medieval interior. One woman is responsible for the care of this historic artwork, Jane Spooner.
This is a very rare survival indeed. Because of our damp climate, a lot of these wall paintings, well, most of them have gone or they've been covered up.
The 14th century mural tells of Christ's crucifixion, and in its day must have cost a fortune to paint. Scientific analysis revealed something exceptional about the pigments used by the artist.
There are some organic pigments, so there's red lac, which is made from the secretions of an Indian insect. So it's a very expensive pigment.
Decades of detective work are revealing the mural's hidden code. The subject conveys a subliminal crime prevention message of shining morality. And the reason it's here? Old plans reveal that from as early as 1278, and for 6 centuries more, this part of the tower houses the Royal Mint. The mural is a warning to God-fearing merchants and treasury officials.
This is the place where merchants would bring bullion in, sell it to the crown, and it would be looked at and tested and valued. And then the crown would buy it and turn it into the king's coin. There's a great deal of potential for fraud, for stealing material, for valuing things wrongly.
The message is clear. God sees all. Thieves and fraudsters will never escape the damnation and fires of hell. Ironically, by 1526, it is the king himself who steals from everybody else to fund England's wars, his wives, and his weapons. He begins replacing precious metal in the nation's coins with much cheaper copper, pocketing the valuable gold and silver. This is infamously much-married King Henry VIII. He rules England as absolute monarch with absolute power between 1509 and 1547. And it was his desire to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, that that signals the start of the tower becoming a dark and macabre backdrop to a story of cruelty and treachery. And religious life in England is split apart. When the Pope refuses to sanction the end of King Henry's marriage, Henry breaks from the Catholic faith, declaring himself supreme head of a new Church of England. Amid years of turmoil, all who question the divorce are thrown into his deepest dungeons. This country cottage facade lies within the tower walls. It hides a dark and dank secret chamber, an illustration of the depths to which Henry sinks in his quest to remarry. The only access is via the Queen's house, currently the private residence of the Governor of the Tower. That means that no tourists ever pass through this door. Only historians like Sally Dixon Smith have the exclusive access. This is the now deserted room once housing Sir Thomas More, one of Henry's chief ministers. He refuses to accept the king as head of the church, so he is imprisoned here for more than a year. Henry sees More's actions as betrayal and treachery, but he's hoping a humane incarceration might encourage a change of heart.
Prison conditions at the Tower do vary enormously. People have this vision of sort of dungeons and rats, and certainly for some people that's true. It really does depend on your social status. If you had nothing, this could be a really horrible, horrible, cold, nasty place. If you can pay for it, you can live well here.
More's imprisonment is, at first, a relatively comfortable affair. Exact details of how this now bare chamber might once have looked no longer exist. But it's believed that such a high-class prisoner as More can enjoy rugs on the cold floor, tapestries on the walls, furniture, candles, books, and even his own domestic servant. Within these walls, he gets visits from his family, bringing food and fine wines.
Over the course of his imprisonment, which was over a year, things get more and more stressful, if you like, between him and the king. It's clear Thomas isn't changing his mind, and so they really start to clamp down on him. They take away his books, they take away his writing materials, they take away access to his family. They're really putting the pressure on.
More stuck to his principles, kept his integrity, but finally lost his life in July 1535. His severed head displayed on Traitor's Gate. With Sir Thomas More's head on a spike, King Henry now has total power over England's political and religious establishment. And his new supremacy deserves the most opulent of palaces. The unbounded extravagance of his spending spree consumes millions of dollars. Much of it going on new royal luxury lodgings for his second wife, Anne Boleyn.
The domes that you can see on the top of the White Tower today, these beautiful onion cupolas, were actually put on by Henry VIII as one of the sort of statements about the White Tower, making it even more visible for Anne's coronation.
600 years ago, Anne arrives at the Tower Palace for a fitting ceremony to crown her Queen of England.
It's the culmination of so many hopes, so much expectation. In fact, she's 6 months pregnant with what they hope will be the heir to the throne, the long-awaited son.
This is the heyday for the Tower as a royal residence, but all was about to change.
For Anne Boleyn, the Tower is the place of her greatest triumph, but also her moments of greatest despair.
Anne fails to produce a male heir for Henry, so she becomes one of the Tower's most tragic victims. May 2nd, 1536. Just 3 years after her glorious coronation, she returns along the River Thames. Henry conspires to have her accused of adultery with 5 men, one of them her brother.
You couldn't fall much further from being a queen to being a traitor.
Anne is the first queen to be executed at the Tower. Her death comes here on Tower Green, away from public gaze.
It's an incredibly moving story and something that really grips you, and I think it's this mixture of something incredibly personal, being so political and having such a massive impact on the country, but it's a story that you can relate to and you can sort of feel that fear.
May 19th, 1536. The bell rings, as is done before and after each execution. The portcullis lowers. Execution is then a notoriously bloody and often botched business. But in an act of humanity, Henry arranges for an expert swordsman to be brought from France for the job. His kindliness is rewarded. In one clean sweep, Anne's head parts company with her neck. But that is not the end of Anne's story. 300 years later, and just a stone's throw from her place of execution, builders installing underground heating unearth a shocking sight. 1,500 skeletal remains, found here at the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula. Most of the bodies are unidentifiable, and so they are reinterred in a crypt, sealed behind this door. But one of them is believed to be the ill-fated queen. This shield on the altar marks the spot where her bones were discovered and then reburied, the final resting place of Anne Boleyn. Anne's head is chopped off within the Tower walls, a privilege reserved for royalty. Most executions take place 150 yards away, at this public site. 125 heads roll here.
We're standing on Tower Hill, absolutely in the middle of the 21st century. You can hear all of the traffic going past.
The biggest public executions draw thousands of people.
There would have been quite a holiday atmosphere. Not for the person being executed, obviously.
The sentence most closely associated with the Tower is beheading by axe, carried out by a masked executioner.
Quite often money would exchange hands in the hope that a clean execution would be granted.
The block with its two curved cutouts is designed to hold the victim's head and upper chest and expose their neck.
The prisoner would indicate when they were ready and the executioner would fulfil his task, sometimes more efficiently than others. There are not so many executions that somebody is an expert in it. Tales are that quite often the executioner was very drunk. It wasn't exactly a high status job to hold. There are tales where it was several strikes to actually take the head from the body.
After the head is displayed to the crowd, it is carried through the streets of London and displayed as a warning to other traitors. In its 900-year-long history, thousands of prisoners pass through the Tower's gates.
The Tower is notorious as a place of imprisonment, of punishment, of torture and of execution. And I think this is because this was used for such high status prisoners.
Famous inmates include Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth I, as well as the legendary Guy Fawkes, who attempts to blow up the British government with 2 tons of gunpowder and receives a fate possibly worse than death: torture. Reputedly, he is stretched on the most infamous of all medieval torture devices, the rack, and tortured further by being manacled and suspended by his wrists.
You cannot sustain being stretched and extended to breaking point, as on the rack, or with manacles, for more than about 5 to 10 minutes without passing out. It's extraordinarily painful, and it's something that was used repeatedly on people to gain confessions.
Despite its very important prisoners, the Tower is far from a maximum security prison. In fact, its first ever inmate, Bishop Ranulph Flambard, escaped. He climbs down a rope dropped out of a window in the White Tower after getting guards drunk on a gallon of wine. 700 years later, Lord Nithsdale makes his escape disguised as a woman. But in the intervening years, the tower gets more effective as a jail, and the Beauchamp Tower is where many of the inmates are held. This, by now, is the main state prison. All around the tower are vestiges of its macabre and sinister past. Like this extraordinary graffiti carved between the 16th and 17th centuries, during a period of religious and political upheaval. This falcon engraving, the royal symbol of Anne Boleyn, is thought to be etched by one of the men arrested alongside her. Poignantly, the royal bird has no crown or sceptre. It stands bareheaded, as does Anne in her last moments on Tower Green. But not all prisoners lose their heads at the tower. Bridget Clifford, keeper of the tower's history, is still trying to piece together the story of an American prisoner from the 18th century.
Henry Lawrence was a prisoner here in the 1780s. He was accused of treason.
As a leader in the American Revolution, he is a prize catch for the British.
Here we have the York Courant, Tuesday, October the 10th, 1780, and it tells the story of his capture at sea. Lawrence was then brought over to the Tower of London.
As the story goes, Lawrence is greeted at the Tower gates by the tune Yankee Doodle Dandy. This is where he's thought to have lived, with a yeoman warder and his wife. To begin with, all he wants to do is escape.
For some time past, I have been frequently and strongly tempted to make my escape from the tower. I might have 18 hours start before I was missed.
But Lawrence is never treated like a common prisoner. It's thought the English feared they could lose the war, so went easy on this important and influential figure. That allows visits from merchants bringing champagne and fine wines, hoping to strike deals with what was soon to become the brand new United States of America. Such useful networking opportunities persuade Lawrence swiftly to abandon his breakout plans.
I put a stop to further applications by saying I will not attempt an escape. The gates were open for me to enter. They shall be open for me to go out of the tower.
And they duly were. In 1781, the Americans agree to a mid-Atlantic transfer. Lawrence is traded for a captured British lord. Like many of the time, Lawrence has a morbid fear of being buried alive. So back home in South Carolina, there is a bizarre twist to the tale. He leaves instructions for his corpse to be decapitated, just in case.
He is somebody who escaped from the tower with his head, but lost his head when he returned home, which is an unusual variant on the theme.
Over centuries past, people face incarceration within the tower. Now, instead of fighting to get out, crowds line up to get in. The tourist rush began in the 19th century. By then, leisure time in England was increasing, and sightseeing was becoming a popular pastime. The Victorians create a new House of Horror fantasy guise for the tower, to draw in day trippers. And all is not as it seems. One little-known secret is that in 1885 the Lanthorn Tower is rebuilt to make it appear more medieval, making the tower akin to a Victorian version of Disneyland. And when London needs a new river crossing, Queen Victoria insists that it must blend in with its next-door neighbour, the Tower of London. Together they become joint attractions in this medieval theme park. In 1880, construction begins on the new gigantic structure, which will become Tower Bridge. The 11,000-ton steelwork is clad in stone, in a faux Gothic style, so as to maintain the fantasy illusion. In all, the bridge costs more than $150 million in today's money. The facade may be imitation, but the engineering is both real and remarkable. Huge arms raise and lower the bridge span, each using massive counterbalances known as bascules, and each operating much like a seesaw. Dave Duffy is responsible for raising and lowering the bridge. His job takes him 30 feet below into the bascule chambers.
But we're in the south bascule chamber. The white part right going across carries approximately 400 tonnes of lead as a counterbalance. So when the bridge outside goes up, everything you see white comes down. Everything you see in here is original. Nothing's been replaced. But then anything the Victorians built, they built to last. At the time of Victorian engineering, it's probably far in advance of anything else that anyone had ever done. Purely just on its size, let alone the structure and the way they did it.
The bridge is still manned 24 hours a day and lifted for vessels over 30 feet high.
Oh, let me know, should be started a long time ago. Right, I've just started the hydraulic pumps up. In each of the corners there's two main pumps. What I'll do is start one pump at a time. Because they have 50 kilowatt motors, if we start the whole lot together, we'll probably black out half a set. There's no set times for lifts. You might get a whole week without a single lift, but during the summer you can get anything up to 20 odd lifts in one day. Pumps are all started. I will now stop the incoming traffic, both north and south. Lady Daphne, Tower Bridge, your lift is underway. Everything is now in the set position, so I'm now raising the bridge. I shall raise the bridge to approximately 45 degrees, which will give the vessel ample room to manoeuvre.
In the bascule chamber, the 1,000 tons of counterweight help the roadway to rise. And the staggering feat of Victorian engineering is revealed in all its glory. With priority given to ships, even smaller vessels such as the Lady Daphne, road traffic must stop and wait.
Vessels clear the bridge, so I'll now start to lower the bridge. Stop the hydraulics, and that is a bridge lift completed.
Tower Bridge is a major London landmark, and just as it always has done, matches perfectly with its neighbour, the Tower of London. The 20th century gives rise to a new challenge: war. During World War II, life at the Tower changes beyond recognition. The gates close to sightseers, and the priceless crown jewels move to a secret, more secure location. The dry moat, previously drained for fear of disease, becomes part of the war effort, an important source of food for Londoners. 15 bombs, 3 missiles, and numerous incendiaries strike the tower. 23 people are killed, but damage to the tower's structures is surprisingly slight. But there is one chilling incident that would go down in history. This ordinary-looking dining chair betrays an extraordinary secret. A few decades ago, it is discovered in the tower stalls. Damage to parts of its wooden frame reveal its true significance in tower history. This is the chair used for the very last execution ever conducted in the Tower of London. August 15th, 1941. German spy Josef Jacobs is captured shortly after parachuting into Britain. Under the Treachery Act of 1940, he is convicted of espionage. As a military officer, Jacobs is spared the usual hanging. He is to be shot by a military firing squad. Jacobs is taken to this firing range within the walls of the tower. He's blindfolded and tied to the chair. A white dot pinned to his chest as an unmissable target. 8 rifle shots seal his fate. This will prove to be the last execution here, a bloody finale to the many equally bloody tales of the tower. Today, this slice of British history is among the country's foremost tourist attractions. And its most celebrated inhabitants are yeoman warders, defenders of the gates and ceremonial guardians of the tower. Phil Wilson is one of those yeoman warders, popularly known as the Beefeaters.
Yeoman warders? Beefeaters indeed.
No one really knows why they're called Beefeaters. One suggestion is that their original role as the king's personal bodyguard entitled them to eat as much beef as they desired from the king's table. Their full state uniforms, including a weave of gold thread, run to $10,000.
What we're wearing today is semi-state dress. We wear this on special occasions that involve the tower.
The tower still has important royal connections. Today it's the Queen's birthday, a popular opportunity to wheel out the big guns.
We will fire a 62-gun salute, which is 21 for Her Majesty, 21 for the City of London, and 20 for the Royal Palace and Fortress of the Tower of London.
The Tower of London is still a self-contained community. The 37 yeoman warders and their families all live on site. They have their own doctor, and even an English pub, reserved strictly for the yeoman warders and VIPs. Alan Kingshott is the chief yeoman warder. He's giving us a rare glimpse of this very private world.
There's my boss. Hello, Mum. It's a very, very special place. You can only come here if you've been invited to come to the Yeoman Warders Club.
This is not only a place for yeoman warders to retire after a day's work, it's also a repository of extraordinary objects.
All around the club there's lots of trinkets, there's lots of plaques, loads of pictures. And these have been given as gifts from people who've come to visit the tower.
Tower life is filled with rituals unseen by the public. Each yeoman warder has their own tankard for the secret ceremonial dinners.
There, that's mine. And there's my tankard there. Just because I'm the chief, it doesn't mean to say you get to put in any sort of prominent position, but there it is.
A big part of yeoman warder life is giving tours of the tower to the hordes of visitors each day and recounting the bloody tales of yesteryear.
Come down and took the top of Scott's head off. Was the bloodiest execution happened on there.
High above them, the chief is able to keep an eye on proceedings from his private quarters. And he's invited us inside to witness what remains an important ritual at any British institution, even the Tower of London.
Tea?
Alan lives here with his wife Pat.
I go make it then for you.
Be nice.
As always. We've been living in here for about 15 years, I think now. It's all very, very quirky because it's an actual round tower. They've had to put false walls in and things like that.
The wardens of the tower have the privilege of living in unique homes, but there are rules and restrictions that go with it.
Because we live at the top of a tower, we've got something like 50 stairs. So trying to get my groceries up, we're not allowed to have an elevator. So it's all steps. When I come back with my shopping, I get comments like, fancy bringing your shopping into a place like this, and I have to resist the urge to put them right. You get used to the hindrances and things that are a little bit out of the normal.
These modern-day prisoners face restrictions better suited to earlier inmates of the tower.
Probably cold by now, dear.
We can't get out easily at night because they lock all the doors at 10 o'clock. If we want to come back after midnight, we have to book in to let them know we're coming back. Otherwise, we could have a problem getting back in.
The yeoman warders have all carried out a minimum of 22 years' service in the British military and received a Good Conduct Medal.
The Yeoman Warder's true title is Yeoman Warder of Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress of Tower of London, Yeoman of the Guard in Extraordinary. Putting the uniform on, you are unique in many respects. You're the icon of all things British. Our roles for a Yeoman Warder has changed quite dramatically. Initially, we would have been custodians of the prisoners that were brought here. These prisoners, of course, were very wealthy people. They're not common criminals who wouldn't have come here, not to the Tower of London.
Alan and Pat's bedroom once housed VIPs. In this case, very important prisoners.
The higher up the building you went, the more important you were in your status. That obviously doesn't apply nowadays. It's those that are the fittest, I think, that can get up the 50-odd stairs that we've got to get here. 2 Scottish lords were held in here in 1747 prior to their execution outside on Tower Hill. Now obviously it's evolved over these years and it's been adapted now for modern day living. So it's our bedroom. You can still see the bars over the window. We still have the fixings on the door, the locks. You can't actually open this thing very quietly. You can't sneak anywhere in this place.
Alan's wife Pat has an extraordinary job. She cares for the nation's most precious and priceless objects. And now she's off to work, as supervisor in the Jewel House, custodian of England's most prized possessions. The Crown Jewels, a breathtaking collection of royal regalia. In all, over 23,000 jewels. Their estimated value is $32 billion, although their emotional and historic value is priceless. They've been guarded here for centuries. The most impressive piece is the Imperial State Crown, a dazzling showstopper for Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. It's encrusted with over 3,000 rare and precious gems. And these celebrated jewels have been on some extraordinary adventures.
In 1671, there was a big heist attempt on the crown jewels. A man called Colonel Blood posed as a clergyman, befriended the jewel house keeper, and then essentially they mug the jewel house keeper and try and steal the jewels.
Blood crushes the Imperial State Crown and hides it under his cloak. The sceptre is attacked with a saw, and his comrade sticks the orb down his breeches. Just as they are about to make their getaway, the alarm is raised and the thieves arrested.
So far, so good. That's the only real attempt there has been.
The jewels have been stored on site since the 14th century. And the Tower's archives reveal when they first became a public attraction.
Originally there would have been jewel houses the south of the White Tower.
You get a sense of the different experiences that you have when you come to the tower. The menagerie, the new armouries.
And you can see that in this map of the tower, the jewel house has moved to the Martin Tower there. And it is one of the sights people come to see.
From as early as the 1660s, the Jewel House forms one of the Tower's attractions. And visitors can view the regalia stored in the basement of this building. After Blood's escapade, security is stepped up. Iron bars replace wooden ones around the regalia, and visitors are never again allowed within touching distance of the collection. But that doesn't discourage the sightseers. By the year 1851, the number of visitors has risen to around 500,000. A purpose-built ticket office is erected to cope with demand. And official tours of the Jewel House begin, even though its presentation attracted some harsh criticism.
There is an account in the early 19th century where the Jewel House is described as being rather like a wash house. An aged lady takes a lantern in, seats everybody down, reveals the jewels, and she has a set script. And if you knock her from her script, she's utterly lost and has to return to the beginning. And I think some people actually made quite a joke of it in the end to see how often they could distract her.
Today, the Crown Jewels live in a purpose-built bank vault within the Waterloo Barracks, the newest building on site. And thousands of tourists queue each day for a glimpse of the Queen's prized possessions. Modern security measures forbid any visitors taking photographs of the jewels, and they may never be filmed in situ. But these are not the only precious possessions stored within the Tower walls. In 2012, a different form of regalia is safeguarded here. All the London Olympics medals, freshly minted from 8 tons of gold, silver and bronze. The Tower is well used to the storage and display of precious objects. It's been home to the longest-running exhibition in the world. Since the 1600s, there has been a lavish display of arms and armour mounted on life-size wooden horses. It's called the Line of Kings. The exhibit is currently off-limits to visitors while it's given a facelift. When armour and weaponry became redundant on the battlefield, it all remained on site. And in the 1650s, someone had the bright idea of displaying it to visitors. Just like the crown jewels, it is designed to impress. The original mission statement is to demonstrate the monarch's right to rule. The mid-1600s is a precarious time to be a king, so in an exercise in public relations, the official Line of Kings is created to big up and fly the flag of the British monarchy, part propaganda, part fantasy. Significant doubts exist over the armour of William the Conqueror. Such armour is not even invented until 500 years after his death. The Line of Kings is a truly theatrical experience. Karen Whitting has the task of bringing it into the 21st century.
What we're doing is reinterpreting it for a new generation. We are following in the tradition of those craftsmen, the mount makers, the people that crafted the horses. We found a photograph of a horse and some wooden plinths during an installation from the 1880s. And that photograph is exactly like the installation here, where we're building wooden plinths and putting horses on them.
Many of these horses, once props for armour, go back hundreds of years. Today they are in themselves rare and precious artefacts. And after months of work, they are once again about to be unveiled to the public.
Once they are in place, you get a real tingle and a buzz because you can see the exhibition taking shape. Yeah, let's do an unveiling. The one that we've just put in here will eventually have a rider on its back as well, so I think it will look really dramatic.
The 400-year-old spectacular royal armour redisplayed is now open to a new generation.
The tower was to survive for another 1,000 years. It's because people want it to. It's because we will continue to have visitors. It's because we can preserve and share this heritage, which is just so exciting.
Preserving all of the tower's treasures, and even the basic fabric of the building, is a 24/7 job. And keeping this royal fortress standing takes a team of people working behind the scenes. Alex Attlesey is one of the building surveyors. Her job allows her a unique view of London and the tower.
The best bits are going in places where nobody else gets to go, so you get these fantastic views of London that nobody else can see. At the moment we're on the Bowyer Tower. We're doing some stone cleaning, repairs, the roof was failing, water was getting in, so we're replacing that.
But that's not all. The walls themselves need attention. And there are plenty of secrets and surprises hiding within them.
We found the stone was loose, and when we took the stone out we found this void. In this one we found 2 bones.
Nobody yet knows exactly why the bones were placed there. One possibility is that they were a superstitious offering to the gods, deposited within the walls by one of Alex's predecessors.
If you look in the background of a lot of old photographs, you can always see a little bit of scaffolding up somewhere. The tower generally has had some building work or some scaffold repair work going on for its entire lifetime.
And there's nothing new about the techniques Alex and her team are deploying.
We have gone back to the traditional construction of the buildings. So we use hand tools to take out the mortar, we use hand tools to carve the stones, and we use the original bedding mixes between the stone joints. So basically we've gone back to how they were built.
A 19th century addition, the gargoyles. Functional as well as decorative. They were used to keep the evil spirits at bay, but had the more practical function of channeling rainwater away from the building. This one is a grotesque. It's purely decorative.
Now we're cleaning it with basically a brass toothbrush and water. And we're cleaning off all this pollution and dirt build-up, because otherwise it suffocates the stone, and then we end up with problems like cracks and things.
The work of Alex and her team is never done. Every 60 years, the cycle of repairs begins again. But as an ancient legend states, if certain residents leave the tower, it might be more than just repairs that are needed. Ravens have been kept here pretty much forever. As the story goes, if the birds depart the tower, the kingdom will fall. So the wings are clipped to keep them lifelong prisoners of the Tower of London. And the man with the job of looking after them, Raven Master Chris Scaife.
There was an ancient legend. If the ravens leave the Tower of London, it would crumble into dust and a great harm would befall the monarchy and the country.
It is the 17th century, and these black birds of doom are about to be shown out of the door.
We had the telescope on top of the White Tower, and there was hundreds of ravens around the tower at that period of time.
The ravens are becoming a pest and interfering with the telescope.
The king said, get rid of them all, until someone turned around to the king and said, Squire, if the ravens leave the Tower of London, it will crumble into dust and yourself will disappear. Now he was quite superstitious, so he thought I'd better keep some ravens here. So he decided to keep 6 here by royal decree. That's why we have 6 here to this day. In fact, I don't. I have 8. I have 2 spare, just in case.
So the ravens are allowed to stay. They often hang around in pairs, but each bird is given a name.
Portia.
Feeding time for the ravens is just another ancient ritual at the tower.
Yum.
They get treated like royalty, eating their way through a ton of meat a year.
There we go.
Sheep's hearts are a favoured raven delicacy. Tower Green, the former site of royal beheadings, is today a haunt for Chris's favourite raven, Merlina.
But Melina at the moment, she's probably behind that bush over there, so we'll just go and have a look over there to see where she is. Come on then. Yeah, there. I'll just go into the jungle and get her out. Come on. Trials and tribulations of a raven master. Good girl. That's better. Right, where did she go? Oh, there she is over there. So keep the ravens here at the Tower of London as wild as possible. She was originally friendly to start off with when she came here. That's the reason why she's my favourite, because I can actually approach her. And on occasions as well, when I'm sitting down in the bloody tower box, she'll come into the box with me and she'll sit with me, and I can actually stroke her and she'll just fall asleep on my lap. It's quite lovely.
Despite having clipped wings, Chris's feathered friends have been known to put the future of the tower in jeopardy.
There have been many occasions where ravens have escaped from the Tower of London. We had an incident about 2 years ago now where Moonim flew off. She flew around the tower and off she went up into the distance. First thing I thought I'd do was check to make sure the tower was still standing. So I checked, yep, still there. 3 days later, we got a phone call from a gentleman who lived near Greenwich, and he'd seen a raven in his back garden, and he'd caught the raven, he'd put it in a bag, and his little head was poking out the bag. Today, it's back at the Tower of London, and it's the longest time a raven's ever been away from the Tower of London in full flight.
With a full contingent of ravens, its beefeaters, stores of secrets and bloody history, the tower survives for another day. As night falls over the great city of London, it's locking up time, an excuse for some more pomp and ceremony.
The ceremony of the keys is the oldest military ceremony anywhere in the world. It goes back more than 700 years. It's also the shortest. It lasts 7.5 minutes.
Who comes there? That keys! Whose keys? Queen Elizabeth's keys! Ah! Queen Elizabeth's keys! All is well! With barge!
This ceremony has been performed every night for 600 years.
I leave at exactly 53 minutes and 25 seconds to carry out the ceremony.
Guard! He's there! Elizabeth! Come in! Town London guard! To the guardroom! Yes!
When we finish the ceremony, we hear the chimes on the jewel house clock, which is exactly 10 o'clock.
And the mighty fortress stands guard over London. just as it has for almost 1,000 years.